Hey there, and welcome to Crazy Pepper, the channel where drama sizzles and revenge burns hotter than ever. If you love jaw dropping twists, bold characters, and stories that keep you guessing till the end, you're in the right place. Subscribe and dive into gripping tales of betrayal, karma, and ultimate payback. Get ready for unforgettable moments and satisfying endings, only on Crazy Pepper. Hit that bell and let the drama begin. The text message arrived at 13:22 p.m. on a Tuesday, 7 years after my wife left me tied to a motel bed in nothing but my hat. She's back in town. I stared at those 4 words until my phone screen went black, then lit it up again. Unknown number. Could have been anyone, but I knew it wasn't. Only one person in this godforsaken city would think to reach out with news like that. My name's Nate, and I've been waiting for this moment longer than I care to admit. 7 years, 3 months, and 16 days to be exact. Not that I was counting or anything. Let me back up. Picture this. You're 30 years old. Think you're living the American dream with a gorgeous wife and a decent construction job. Your wife Jenna suggests a romantic weekend getaway to spice things up. She's got these 2 sisters, Emily and Lexi, always hanging around like vultures. But hey, sisters stick together, right? Wrong. The romantic getaway turned into the most expensive practical joke of my life. Jenna and her sisters tied me to the bed with actual rope, said it was kinky foreplay. I played along because, hell, I trusted her. Then they cleaned out my wallet, took my car keys, grabbed my passport from the nightstand, and walked out the door laughing. But here's the kicker. Jenna filmed the whole thing, live-streamed it to her friends while I'm there in my boxers, tied up like a Christmas turkey, screaming for help. The comments were flooding in. People I knew, people from work, even her lover Carter making jokes about my performance. Yeah, Carter. Her boyfriend. The guy she was cheating with while married to me. Classy, right? It took me 4 hours to get free, using a broken spring from that ratty motel mattress to cut through the rope. 4 hours of humiliation, listening to other guests complain about the noise. The desk clerk wouldn't help, thought it was some kind of bedroom game gone wrong. By the time I got loose, Jenna had already posted the video on social media. 23,000 views in 6 hours. My life was over before I even made it home. The divorce papers were waiting on the kitchen table with a note. Hope you enjoyed your last ride, loser. Don't bother contesting anything. I've got lawyers. She kept the house, the car, half my 401k, and whatever dignity I had left. That was 7 years ago. Now I'm 37, running my own construction crew, and built like someone who moves concrete blocks for a living. My hands are scarred, my back aches every morning, and I've got exactly 3 people in this world I trust. Myself, my foreman Red, and Mrs. Winchell from next door who makes the best apple pie this side of hell. Mrs. Winchell also happens to know everyone's business in a 50-mile radius, which is why I wasn't surprised when she knocked on my door at 6 a.m. the next morning, coffee mug in hand. Nate, honey, she said, settling into my kitchen chair like she owned it. You hear about Jenna? I poured myself coffee, trying to look casual. What about her? Moved back Monday. Got herself a fancy house on Elm Street. You know, the white colonial with the wraparound porch. Heard she married that Carter fellow. He's selling cars now at Peterson's lot downtown. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. That's so? Mm-hmm. And those sisters of hers? Emily's working at the bank. Lexi's got some job at the mall. Real reunion they're having. She leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Of course, there's talk about why they came back so sudden-like. What kind of talk? Mrs. Winchell smiled like a cat with cream. Word is Carter's dealership in Portland went under. Bad investments, they say. Had to sell everything and move somewhere cheaper. She paused dramatically. Some folks think they're running from more than just debt. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. But inside, something cold and patient was waking up. Something that had been sleeping for 7 years, waiting for exactly this moment. Interesting, I said. Thought you'd want to know. She stood, rinsing her mug in my sink. You take care of yourself, Nate. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is living well. After she left, I sat in my kitchen for a long time watching the sun come up over the construction sites and abandoned lots of our little corner of nowhere. This city had 2 kinds of people, those trying to get out and those too stubborn or broken to leave. Guess which kind I was. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found Red's number. Need to meet. Important. His reply came back in 30 seconds. Murphy's Bar. 1 hour. Murphy's was the kind of place where the beer was cold, the music was loud, and nobody asked questions they didn't want answered. Red was already there when I arrived, nursing a whiskey and looking like he'd been expecting this conversation for years. Red got his nickname from his hair, which was still flame bright despite pushing 40. He'd grown up in the same neighborhood as me, knew all the same people, and had a talent for acquiring information that most folks couldn't get through legal channels. "She's back," I said, sliding onto the bar stool next to him. "I know." He signaled the bartender for another round. "Question is, what you gonna do about it?" "I've been thinking about that for 7 years." "And?" I took a long pull from my beer, tasting the bitterness. "Remember what you told me the day the divorce was final?" Red grinned, and it wasn't a nice expression. "I told you patience was a virtue. You also said someday she'd get what was coming to her." "Still believe that." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "But if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, you gotta be smart about it. Can't just go off half-cocked like some revenge movie." "I'm not stupid, Red. Never said you were, but you're angry." "Been angry for 7 years. Angry makes people sloppy." He was right, and we both knew it. But the anger had also made me focused, made me better at everything, better at construction, better at reading people, better at planning. "What do you know about their situation?" I asked. Red pulled out his phone, scrolled through something. "Carter's car lot is barely staying afloat. He owes money to some people who don't like waiting for payments. Jenna's working at Morton and Associates, that law firm downtown that handles mostly divorce cases. Ironic, right? What about the sisters? Emily's at First National Junior Loan Officer. Lexi works retail at the mall, some clothing store. Neither one's exactly rolling in money." Red paused. "But here's the interesting part. Word is they're not all getting along so well anymore." "How so?" "Heard Emily and Carter had some kind of argument last week at the grocery store. Something about him hitting on the wrong person. And Lexi hasn't been seen around their place much lately." I absorbed this information slowly. After 7 years of thinking about revenge, I'd learned that the best plans started with understanding your enemy. And these people, my enemies, were apparently doing a fine job of creating their own problems. "I need details," I said. "Everything you can find out. Where they live, where they work, who they talk to, what they drive, all of it." "That's going to take time." "I've got nothing but time." Red finished his whiskey and stood up. "You sure about this, Nate? Once you start down this road, there's no taking it back." I met his eyes. "She took everything from me. My marriage, my reputation, my dignity, made me a laughingstock in my own town." I paused, feeling that cold thing inside me stretch and wake up fully. Now it's my turn. The next morning, I started my research. First stop, a drive past the house on Elm Street. Mrs. Winchell was right. It was a nice colonial with a wraparound porch, probably built in the 1920s and recently renovated. White paint, black shutters, perfectly manicured lawn. The kind of place that screamed, "We're doing just fine, thank you very much." A silver Mercedes sat in the driveway. Carter's ride, no doubt. The man always did have expensive tastes, even when he couldn't afford them. I parked across the street and waited. Construction work had taught me patience. Sometimes you had to sit on a problem for hours before you could see the solution. At 8:15, Jenna came out the front door. 7 years had been kind to her, I had to admit. Still blonde, still put together, still moving with that confident stride that said the world owed her whatever she wanted. She wore a navy blue business suit and carried a briefcase that probably cost more than I made in a week. She got into a red BMW, her car, apparently, and backed out of the driveway. I followed at a safe distance, watching her navigate the morning traffic toward downtown. Morton and Associates occupied the second floor of a brick building on Main Street. I parked where I could see the entrance and settled in to wait. This was reconnaissance, nothing more. I needed to understand their routines, their habits, their vulnerabilities. At 9:30, Carter emerged from Peterson's used cars, just 3 blocks away. He was thicker around the middle than he used to be, his hair showing gray at the temples. The cocky swagger was still there, but it looked forced now, like a man trying to convince himself he was still young and successful. He drove past the law office, slowing down as he passed, looking up at the windows like he was checking on something. Or someone. Interesting. I spent the next week following the same routine, watching, learning, taking mental notes. By Friday, I had a clear picture of their lives. Jenna left for work at 8:15 every morning, came home around 6 p.m. Twice that week, she stopped at the grocery store or dry cleaner. She ate lunch at the same cafe every Tuesday and Thursday, always alone, always sitting at the table by the window where she could see the street. Carter opened his lot at 9 a.m. sharp, closed at 7 p.m. He drove a different car every day, probably test driving his own inventory. The lot looked busy enough, but I could tell from the way he acted that business wasn't great. Too eager with potential customers, too desperate in his sales pitch. Emily worked banker's hours at First National, 9 to 5 with an hour lunch break. She drove a practical Honda Civic and dressed like someone trying to look professional on a budget. Lexi was the wild card. Her schedule at the clothing store was irregular. Sometimes mornings, sometimes evenings, sometimes not at all. She drove a beat-up Nissan that was at least 10 years old and lived in a studio apartment above the dry cleaner. But the most interesting observation came on Thursday afternoon. I was sitting in my truck across from Peterson's used cars when Emily's Honda pulled into the lot. She got out, walked straight to Carter's office, and went inside. Through the window, I could see them talking. Emily was gesturing angrily, pointing her finger at Carter's chest. He was holding up his hands, trying to calm her down. The conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes. When Emily came out, she was crying. She sat in her car for another 5 minutes before driving away. That evening, I called Red. "Something's going on between Emily and Carter," I said. "What kind of something?" I described what I'd seen. Red was quiet for a long moment. "I might know someone who knows someone at the bank," he said finally. "Give me a day or two." 2 days later, Red had answers. "Emily applied for a loan last month," he said. "Personal loan, $15,000. Got turned down because her credit's shot. Apparently, she co-signed on something a few years back that went bad." "What kind of something?" "Business loan for a car dealership in Portland?" The pieces started clicking together. Carter's failed dealership, Emily's bad credit, their sudden move back to town. They were all connected, all tied together by money and bad decisions. "There's more," Red continued. "Emily's been asking around town about bankruptcy lawyers, and Carter's been making trips to the casino over in Riverside. Weekly trips, usually losing big." "How big?" "Big enough that he's been borrowing money from people who don't like to be kept waiting." This was better than I'd hoped. They weren't just broke, they were desperate. And desperate people made mistakes. I spent that weekend developing my plan. The key was to make their existing problems worse, not create new ones. Push them in the direction they were already heading, just faster and harder. Make them turn on each other instead of standing together. Phase 1 would target Carter directly. His ego, his reputation, his precious image as a successful businessman. Monday morning, I drove to Peterson's used cars and walked onto the lot like any other customer. Carter spotted me immediately. A potential sale always got his attention. "Good morning," he called out, walking over with his salesman's smile. "Looking for something special today?" He didn't recognize me. 7 years, plus the beard and the muscles I'd built working construction, had changed me enough that I was just another face to him. Perfect. "Maybe," I said. "Heard you folks might be having a sale soon." His smile faltered slightly. "Sale? Who told you that?" I shrugged. "Just talk around town. You know how it is. People hear things." "What kind of things?" "Oh, you know, business troubles, money problems, the usual." I gestured toward the cars. "Course, that's probably just gossip. I'm sure you're doing great." Carter's face was turning red. "We're doing fine. Business is excellent." "Glad to hear it." I smiled at him. The same kind of smile I'd seen on his face 7 years ago while he was watching my humiliation live streamed. Guess I heard wrong. I started to walk away, then turned back like I'd just remembered something. "Oh, hey, aren't you married to Jenna Peterson? Used to be Jenna Williams?" Now his face went pale. "Yeah, that's my wife." "Thought so. Heard about that crazy thing she did to her first husband. What was his name? Nate something? Tied him up in a motel room and streamed it online?" I shook my head. "Wild stuff. Hope that guy got over it okay." Carter stared at me for a long moment. "Who are you?" "Just a guy looking for a car." I handed him a fake business card I'd had made up. "Steve Miller, Miller Construction. Give me a call if you get any good trucks in." I walked back to my truck, feeling his eyes on me the whole way. In my rearview mirror, I could see him standing in the middle of his lot, holding my fake business card and looking like someone had just walked over his grave. Phase 1, complete. That evening, Mrs. Winchell knocked on my door again. "Heard there was some excitement at Peterson's today," she said, settling into her usual chair. "Oh yeah?" "Mm-hmm. Carter called the police around noon, said someone was harassing customers on his lot. But when they showed up, couldn't find anybody who'd been bothered. She stirred sugar into her coffee. Course, Carter was acting real strange, nervous-like. Huh? Then around 3 p.m., he closed early and drove over to Morton and Associates. Stayed there about an hour. When he came out, he and Jenna were having what looked like a heated discussion in the parking lot. I nodded, trying to look mildly interested instead of deeply satisfied. People are starting to talk, Mrs. Winchell continued. Wondering if maybe those Peterson folks aren't doing as well as they let on. Small towns, I said. People love their gossip. Indeed they do. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. You know, Nate, I always thought you were too good for that woman. Glad to see you landed on your feet. After she left, I allowed myself a small smile. The rumor mill was already starting to work in my favor. In a town this size, reputation was everything. Once people started talking about your problems, the problems had a way of getting worse. My phone buzzed with a text from Red. Heard Carter made some calls today, asking about private investigators. I typed back, good, let him waste his money. Phase 2 would target Jenna directly. But for that, I needed help from someone who knew her weaknesses better than I did. Someone like Emily. Wednesday afternoon, I waited outside First National Bank until Emily came out for lunch. She walked to the same sandwich shop she'd been going to all week, ordered the same turkey and Swiss on whole wheat, and sat at the same table by the window. I waited 5 minutes, then walked in and got in line behind her. Emily? I said, like I'd just noticed her. Emily Peterson? She turned around, and I could see the recognition dawning on her face. 7 years and a lot of hard living had changed me, but not enough. Nate? Her voice was barely a whisper. Hey there. Heard you were back in town. She looked around nervously, like she was planning an escape route. Yeah, we moved back last month. Great. We should catch up sometime. I smiled at her the way I used to smile at subcontractors who were behind schedule. Friendly, but with something sharp underneath. I'd love to hear what you and Jenna and Lexi have been up to. Emily's hands were shaking. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? We're all adults here. Water under the bridge, right? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Besides, I heard you might be going through some financial difficulties. Maybe I could help. Her face went white. Who told you that? Small town, Emily. People talk. I handed her another fake business card. Miller Construction. I'm always looking for good people, and I remember you being real smart with numbers. She stared at the card like it might bite her. I have a job. Sure, but banks don't pay much, especially for junior positions. I paused. And I heard about the loan situation. That's got to be stressful. Emily looked like she was about to cry. What do you want? Just to talk. Maybe grab coffee tomorrow evening? Murphy's Bar has a nice quiet corner where we won't be bothered. I can't. Jenna would what? I interrupted. Tell you what you can and can't do. You're 33 years old, Emily. You can have coffee with whoever you want. She clutched her purse tighter. You don't understand. Things are complicated right now. I understand more than you think. I leaned in closer. I understand that sometimes family isn't there for you when you need them most. I understand what it feels like to be left holding the bag while someone else gets away clean. Emily's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't my idea, she whispered. The motel thing. I told her it was too far, that we should just take your money and leave. But she wanted to humiliate you. I know. I kept my voice gentle, understanding. You were just following your sister's lead. That's what family does, right? She nodded, wiping her eyes. Tomorrow evening, I said. 7 o'clock. Just coffee and conversation. I left her standing there, staring at my fake business card and probably wondering how her life had gotten so complicated. The next evening, Emily showed up at Murphy's right on time. She looked tired, nervous, and desperate. Exactly what I was hoping for. Thanks for coming, I said, gesturing to the corner booth I'd claimed. Can I get you something to drink? Just coffee. She slid into the seat across from me, keeping her purse in her lap like a shield. I signaled the waitress, ordered coffee for both of us, then turned my attention back to Emily. Up close, she looked older than her 33 years. The stress was wearing on her. So, I said once our coffee arrived, how's married life treating Jenna? Emily's laugh was bitter. How do you think? Problems in paradise. She stirred sugar into her coffee, not meeting my eyes. Carter's a pig. Always has been. I tried to warn her, but she never listens to anybody. What kind of pig? Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then, like a dam bursting, he hit on me at their wedding reception. His own wedding, and he's trying to get me to meet him in the coat closet. She shook her head. And it's only gotten worse since they moved back. He thinks because we're all living in the same town again, he can just, I don't know, collect the whole set. The whole set? Jenna, me, Lexi. He's made passes at all of us. Lexi actually slapped him last week. This was even better than I'd hoped. Does Jenna know? Are you kidding? Jenna sees what she wants to see. Always has. Emily took a shaky sip of coffee. She's so focused on maintaining her image, proving to everyone that she landed a successful man, she doesn't notice that her successful man is a creep who can't keep his hands to himself. And the money troubles, Emily's face crumpled. It's bad, Nate, really bad. The business in Portland didn't just fail. Carter was stealing from investors. We had to leave town before the lawsuits started flying. We? I co-signed on everything. The business loan, the equipment loans, even the lease on his fancy office. When it all went south, guess who was on the hook? She laughed bitterly. Jenna was protected because they weren't married yet, but me, I lost everything. What about Lexi? Lexi's smart enough to keep her distance. She never trusted Carter, never got involved in his schemes. Now she's working retail and living in that crappy apartment, but at least her credit's intact. I leaned back, processing this information. Emily was deeper in the hole than I'd realized, and Lexi might actually be an ally rather than an enemy. So what's the plan now? I asked. I don't know. Carter keeps saying he's got deals in the works, ways to make back the money, but his deals are what got us into this mess. Emily looked up at me. Why are you being nice to me? You should hate me after what we did. Maybe I'm not the same person I was 7 years ago. Maybe. She was quiet for a moment. I think about that day sometimes. What we did to you, it was cruel. It was... Jenna said it was just a prank. Said you'd get over it, find it funny eventually. Emily shook her head. But I saw your face when we left. That wasn't someone who was going to find it funny. No, it wasn't. I'm sorry, Nate. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. I studied her face, looking for deception. But Emily had always been the most honest of the three sisters, the one who went along but never really belonged. Her apology seemed genuine. Apology accepted, I said. Relief flooded her features. Really? Really? But I have a question for you. Okay. If you could go back and do that day over again, what would you do differently? Emily didn't hesitate. I'd tell Jenna no. I'd refuse to go along with it. Even if it meant she'd cut you off, stop talking to you? Especially then. Emily's voice was stronger now, more certain. Jenna's been controlling me my whole life, making me feel like I need her approval for everything. That day, following her lead, it cost me my self-respect. And look where it got me. Broke, desperate, and tied to a man who treats women like objects. What would you say if I told you there was a way to get free of all this? To start over clean? Emily leaned forward. I'd say I'm listening. I pulled out my real business card this time. Miller Construction is a front. My real name is Nate Williams, and I've been waiting 7 years for this conversation. Emily stared at the card, then at me. You want revenge. I want justice. There's a difference. What kind of justice? The kind where Jenna and Carter face consequences for their actions. The kind where people like you get a chance to start over instead of being dragged down by other people's schemes. Emily was quiet for a long time. What would I have to do? Nothing illegal, nothing that would hurt innocent people. Just help me show the world who Jenna and Carter really are. And then? Then you walk away. Clean slate, no debt, no ties to their problems. How? I've got money saved up. 7 years of living cheap and working hard. Enough to pay off your debts and give you a fresh start somewhere else. Emily's eyes widened. Why would you do that? Because you're not my enemy, Emily. You never were. You were just caught up in someone else's game. She stared at me for a long moment. What about Lexi? What about her? Would the same offer apply to her? If she's interested in getting free of this mess, yeah. Emily nodded slowly. She will be. Lexi's been trying to get out from under Jenna's influence for years. So? Emily reached across the table and shook my hand. So, let's talk details. The next morning, I met Lexi at a coffee shop across town. Emily had set it up, told her sister that there was someone who might be able to help with their situation. Lexi was different from Emily. Tougher, more suspicious, less willing to trust. But she was also angrier. 7 years of watching her sisters make bad decisions had left her bitter and resentful. "So, you're the famous Nate," she said, settling into the booth across from me. "Emily told me you were back. Here I am. She also told me about your offer. Sounds too good to be true." "Usually is, but not this time." Lexi studied me with sharp eyes. "What's the catch?" "No catch. I help you get free of this mess. You help me show people who Jenna and Carter really are." "What kind of help?" I outlined the same deal I'd made with Emily. Information, access, testimony when the time came. Nothing illegal, nothing that would put her in danger. "And you'll pay off our debts? Just like that?" "Just like that." Lexi was quiet for a moment. "You must really hate her." "I don't hate her. I hate what she did. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah. Hating her would make this personal. This isn't personal. It's business." Lexi laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Everything's personal with Jenna. You'll figure that out soon enough." "Maybe, but right now, she doesn't know I'm coming. That gives me an advantage. For now. But Jenna's smart, and she's got resources. Once she figures out what's happening, she won't have her sisters to back her up." Lexi met my eyes. "No, she won't." We shook hands, and I had my inside team. Over the next 2 weeks, Emily and Lexi fed me information about Jenna and Carter's lives, their schedules, their fights, their secrets. It was better than I'd dared hope. Carter was definitely having money problems. He owed money to several people around town, including some folks who weren't the type to take, "I'll pay you next week," for an answer indefinitely. He was also cheating on Jenna, not just flirting, but actually cheating, with a secretary from the insurance office next door to his lot. Jenna was having problems of her own. The law firm where she worked was considering laying people off, and her billable hours weren't impressive. She was spending money they didn't have, trying to maintain an image of success that was becoming harder and harder to sustain, and neither one of them had any idea that the ground was shifting beneath their feet. It was time for phase 3. On a Thursday morning, I drove to Peterson's used cars and walked onto the lot like I owned it. Carter was in his office, talking on the phone and gesturing angrily. Through the window, I could see the stress written all over his face. I waited until he hung up, then knocked on his door. "We're closed," he called out. "I'm not here to buy a car, Carter." The door opened, and Carter stared at me with growing recognition. "You?" "I knew I recognized you the other day." "Yeah, you know me. Nate Williams, the guy whose life you helped destroy 7 years ago." Carter tried to close the door, but I put my shoulder against it. I was bigger than him now, stronger, and we both knew it. "What do you want?" he asked. "To talk. I've got nothing to say to you." "That's fine. I'll do the talking." I pushed past him into the office and closed the door behind me. "Nice place you got here. Too bad it's not going to last." Carter backed up against his desk. "You can't threaten me. I'll call the police." "No threats, Carter. Just facts." I pulled out a folder from my jacket. Fact 1. You owe $17,000 to various people around town. Fact 2. Your insurance secretary girlfriend is married, and her husband's a cop. Fact 3. The state insurance commission is investigating some irregularities in your dealer license application. His face went pale. "How do you—" "Fact 4, I continued. Your wife doesn't know about any of this. Yet. What do you want?" "I want you to remember what it feels like to be helpless. To have your life turned upside down by someone else's choices." I leaned against his desk, casual and relaxed. 7 years ago, you thought it was hilarious to watch me get humiliated. Remember? You were making jokes in the chat while your girlfriend streamed my degradation to the world. Carter was sweating now. That was just a prank. Yeah, that's what she said too. I smiled at him. Well, guess what, Carter? This is my prank. You can't do this. Sure I can. In fact, I already am. I stood up, straightening my jacket. See, the beautiful thing about small towns is that once people start talking about your problems, the problems get bigger. Word gets around. People lose confidence. Business dries up. Nobody will believe you. Maybe not, but they'll believe Emily and Lexi when they start talking about your business practices. They'll believe bank records. They'll believe police reports. I headed for the door. And they'll definitely believe video evidence. What video evidence? I turned back to him with a grin. Check your email in about an hour. I think you'll find it interesting. I left him standing there, probably already reaching for his phone to call Jenna, but I wasn't worried about that. By the time she got involved, it would be too late. The video I'd mentioned was simple but effective. Emily had used her phone to record Carter hitting on the insurance secretary, propositioning her in the parking lot behind his dealership. Nothing X-rated, but clear enough to show what kind of man he really was. I'd had it professionally edited and uploaded to an anonymous email account. In an hour, it would be sent to Jenna, the secretary's husband, and about 50 other people around town, including Mrs. Winchell, who would make sure everyone else saw it too. But that was just the opening move. At 6 p.m. that evening, I was parked across the street from Morton and Associates when Jenna came storming out of the building. Even from a distance, I could see she was furious. She got in her BMW and peeled out of the parking lot, heading straight for the car dealership. I followed at a safe distance, arriving just in time to see her march onto Carter's lot and into his office. Through the windows, I could see them shouting at each other. Their body language told the whole story. Accusations, denials, more accusations. The fight lasted 20 minutes. When Jenna came out, she was crying. But they were angry tears, not sad ones. She got in her car and drove home. Carter stood in his office doorway watching her go, then pulled out his phone and made a call. I was betting that call was to Emily or Lexi, asking them to talk to Jenna, calm her down. But Emily and Lexi had their own instructions now. Instead of calming Jenna down, they were going to make things worse. That night, Lexi called Jenna and told her she'd seen Carter with another woman at the casino in Riverside. Emily sent Jenna screenshots of text messages Carter had sent her, asking her to meet him at a motel. Both calls were lies, of course, but they were believable lies, and Jenna was already primed to suspect the worst. By morning, Jenna had kicked Carter out of the house. Mrs. Winchell brought me the news with my morning coffee. "Quite a bit of excitement on Elm Street last night," she said, settling into her usual chair. "Police showed up around midnight. Domestic disturbance call." "Oh? Mm-hmm. Seems Jenna Peterson threw her husband's clothes out on the front lawn. All of them, even his underwear." Mrs. Winchell chuckled. "Poor man had to gather everything up in the dark while half the neighborhood watched from their windows. Where's he staying now?" "Motel 6 out by the highway. Same place where—" She trailed off, realizing what she was about to say. "Same place where Jenna left me 7 years ago," I finished. Poetic justice. "Indeed." Mrs. Winchell stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Course, word is this might not be over. Heard Carter's been making some phone calls, talking about getting lawyers involved." "Let him. Lawyers cost money he doesn't have." "True enough." She stood to leave. "You know, Nate, I always said that woman would get her comeuppance eventually. Looks like I was right." After she left, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Phase 3 was working perfectly. Carter was isolated, desperate, and making the kind of mistakes that desperate people always make. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Jenna wants to meet, says she knows what's happening." I typed back, "When and where?" "Tonight. Murphy's Bar, 8 p.m. She coming alone?" "Says she is." Perfect. It was time for the face-to-face confrontation I'd been building toward for 7 years. I spent the day preparing. Not weapons or anything dramatic. Just making sure I had all my documentation ready, all my evidence organized, all my facts straight. This wasn't going to be a street fight. This was going to be a demolition. At 7:45, I walked into Murphy's and claimed the same corner booth where I'd met with Emily and Lexi. I ordered a beer and settled in to wait. Jenna arrived exactly at 8 p.m. looking like she was dressed for battle. Designer suit, perfect makeup, hair styled to corporate perfection. But I could see the cracks in the armor, the slight tremor in her hands, the tightness around her eyes, the way she scanned the room like she was looking for threats. She spotted me and walked over, moving with that familiar, confident stride. But it looked forced now, like she was acting a part she didn't quite believe in anymore. "Hello, Nate." "Jenna." I gestured to the seat across from me. "Thanks for coming." She sat down but didn't relax. "Let's skip the pleasantries. I know what you're doing." "Do you?" "You're trying to destroy my life, turn my sisters against me, break up my marriage, ruin my reputation." She leaned forward, eyes flashing. "But it's not going to work." "Isn't it?" I took a sip of my beer. "Seems like it's working pretty well so far." "Carter and I will work things out, we always do." "Maybe. But will you work out the money problems, the gambling debts, the investigation into his business practices?" Jenna's composure slipped slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You're a lawyer, Jenna. You understand consequences better than most people." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through some photos. "Here's Carter at the Riverside Casino last Tuesday night. Lost $4,000 on blackjack." Here's the complaint filed with the state about his dealer license. Here's a copy of the loan documents Emily signed, making her responsible for his debts. Jenna stared at the phone screen, her face growing paler with each image. How did you get this information? Same way I got everything else, by being patient, thorough, and having friends in the right places. I put the phone away. 7 years is a long time to plan, Jenna. Long enough to learn who you really are and what you really care about. What I care about? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't know anything about me. I know you care about your image, your reputation, being seen as successful, attractive, in control. I leaned back in my seat. I know you care about being the center of attention, the one everyone else looks up to. So I'm going to take all of that away from you, piece by piece, exactly the way you took everything away from me. Jenna's mask finally slipped completely. You bastard. You think you can just waltz back into town and ruin my life because of some stupid prank? Stupid prank? I set my beer down carefully. You tied me to a bed, robbed me, and broadcast my humiliation to the world. You destroyed my marriage, my reputation, my ability to trust anyone. That wasn't a prank, Jenna. That was cruelty. You got over it. Did I? I met her eyes. Look at me, Jenna. Really look. Do I look like someone who got over it? She stared at me, and I could see recognition dawning. The man sitting across from her wasn't the same person she'd left tied up in that motel room. That man had been soft, trusting, naive. This man was harder, colder, infinitely more dangerous. What do you want? She whispered. I want you to understand what it feels like to be powerless, to have your life torn apart by someone else's choices, to wake up every morning knowing that everything you thought you could count on was an illusion. And then I want you to live with it, the way I had to live with what you did. Jenna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, more vulnerable. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The whole thing, it was just, we were young, stupid. It seemed funny at the time. Funny to who? To everyone. You should have seen the comments, the reactions. People thought it was hilarious. People thought my humiliation was hilarious. Yes. She looked down at her hands. I guess that makes me a terrible person. It makes you someone who got away with hurting people because nobody held you accountable. Until now. Jenna looked up at me, and for a moment I saw something that might have been genuine remorse. What would it take to make this stop? Make what stop? All of it. The attacks on Carter, turning my sisters against me, whatever else you've got planned. I considered the question. Nothing. Nothing? There's nothing you can do or say that will make me stop. This train left the station 7 years ago, and it's not slowing down until it reaches the end of the line. You're going to destroy innocent people. Emily, Lexi. They don't deserve this. Emily and Lexi are getting a chance to start over clean. They're not being destroyed. They're being liberated. From what? From you. I finished my beer and stood up. From being accessories to your schemes, enablers of your cruelty, victims of your manipulation. Jenna grabbed my arm as I started to walk away. Wait. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. What? I'm sorry for what we did to you. I'm truly, genuinely sorry. I studied her face, looking for deception. But like Emily's apology, this one seemed real. Too little, too late, but real. I believe you, I said. But sorry doesn't undo the damage. Sorry doesn't give me back the 7 years I spent rebuilding my life from nothing. So this is it? You're just going to destroy everything I've worked for? Everything you worked for was built on a foundation of lies, manipulation, and other people's misery. I'm not destroying it. I'm just removing the supports and letting gravity do the rest. I pulled my arm free and walked out of the bar, leaving Jenna sitting alone in the corner booth. In my peripheral vision, I could see her crying, but I didn't look back. The next morning brought news that Carter had been arrested. Apparently, Mrs. Winchell explained over coffee, that insurance secretary he was fooling around with? Turns out her husband had been suspicious for weeks. When that video showed up yesterday, he decided to do some investigating of his own. Find anything interesting? Oh my, yes. Seems Carter had been falsifying insurance documents for his car sales. Nothing major, just inflating coverage to make the deals more attractive. But insurance fraud is insurance fraud. What's the penalty for that? Well, it's a felony. Could be looking at serious jail time if they decide to prosecute. Mrs. Winchell leaned forward conspiratorially. But here's the really interesting part. Word is he's trying to make a deal with the prosecutor, offering information about other people's crimes in exchange for a reduced sentence. Other people? Mm-hmm. People who might have helped him with his schemes over the years. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. Carter was going to throw Jenna under the bus to save his own skin. I'd been counting on that. What kind of information? Well, I couldn't say for certain, but you know how these things go. When someone's facing prison time, they suddenly remember all sorts of things they forgot to mention before. After Mrs. Winchell left, I called Emily. Heard about Carter, I said. Yeah, Jenna's been calling all morning, crying, asking me to post bail. Emily's voice was tired. I told her I don't have that kind of money. Do you? Are you kidding? I'm barely making rent. She paused. But even if I did, I wouldn't. Carter made his own bed. What about Jenna? What about her? She tried to convince you to lie for him? Provide an alibi? Claim you were somewhere you weren't? Emily was quiet for a moment. How did you know? Because that's what she does. When things go wrong, she finds someone else to take the blame or cover for her. She said it was family loyalty, that we had to stick together. And what did you tell her? I told her my loyalty to family ended the day she got me into this financial mess. Emily's voice was stronger now. I told her I was done being her cleanup crew. Good for you. Lexi said the same thing. We both did. How's she taking it? About like you'd expect. Screaming, crying, making threats, promising revenge. Emily laughed bitterly. She actually said she was going to have us both fired from our jobs. Can she do that? She can try. But my boss at the bank knows the whole story now, knows that I was just a victim of Carter's schemes, and Lexi's manager at the mall never liked Jenna anyway. So you're both safe? We're both free. For the first time in our lives, we're free of her. The next phase of my plan was already in motion, but it didn't require any action from me. Carter's arrest had triggered an investigation into his business practices, which led to questions about his associates and family members. Within 48 hours, investigators were looking into Jenna's finances, her involvement in Carter's Portland dealership, and her knowledge of his fraudulent activities. It turned out she knew more than she'd admitted. 3 days after Carter's arrest, Jenna was suspended from her job at Morton & Associates pending the outcome of the investigation. The suspension was with pay, but everyone in town knew what that meant. They were preparing to fire her, but wanted to do it legally. By the end of the week, the local newspaper had picked up the story. Local lawyer under investigation for insurance fraud. The article was factual, professional, and devastating. But the real blow came from an unexpected source. I was at Murphy's Bar Friday evening, celebrating a successful work week with Red, when Emily called. You need to see this, she said. Turn on Channel 8, the 6 o'clock news. Red found the remote and switched to the local news station. The anchor was just introducing a segment. Tonight at 6, a Channel 8 investigation into alleged insurance fraud at a local car dealership. We'll hear from victims who say they were sold policies that didn't exist, and from a whistleblower who was inside the operation. The whistleblower turned out to be Lexi. She'd contacted the news station with documentation of Carter's fraudulent activities, documents she'd been secretly copying for weeks, anticipating exactly this situation. I worked for my sister and brother-in-law for 6 months, Lexi said, her face hidden in shadow but her voice clear. I saw them selling insurance policies that were either inadequate or completely fake. When I tried to report it internally, I was told to keep my mouth shut or find another job. The reporter pressed for more details. And your sister? Did she know about these activities? My sister knew everything. She helped design some of the schemes. Her legal training made her very good at finding ways to make illegal activities look legal on paper. The interview continued for 10 minutes, with Lexi providing specific examples, dates, and documentation. By the time it was over, Jenna's reputation in town was completely destroyed. Damn, Red said, turning off the TV. That girl doesn't mess around. No, she doesn't. I pulled out my phone and called Emily. Saw the news. Lexi okay? She's fine. Scared, but fine. She's been planning this for weeks, gathering evidence, making copies of everything. Why didn't you tell me? Because she wanted it to be her decision, her choice, not part of your revenge plan. I could respect that. What's next? Jenna's been served with papers, civil lawsuit from the people who got ripped off, and the state's opened a criminal investigation. And Carter? Still in jail. His lawyer's trying to work out a plea deal, but it's not looking good. After I hung up, Red looked at me with something like admiration. You really did it, didn't you? Took her down without breaking a single law. I didn't take her down. She took herself down. I just removed the people who were protecting her from the consequences of her actions. Same thing. Maybe. But there was still one more phase to my plan. The final confrontation. The moment when Jenna would understand completely and finally what she had done and what it had cost her. The opportunity came 2 weeks later. Jenna had been evicted from the house on Elm Street. Turns out the mortgage was in Carter's name, and with him in jail, the payments had stopped. She was staying at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the same chain where she'd left me 7 years earlier. Different location, but the same brand of institutional humiliation. Emily called to let me know. She's at the Economy Inn on Route 9, room 237. How do you know? She called Lexi, begging for money. Lexi told her no, but she felt bad enough to let me know where Jenna was staying. In case of what? In case you wanted to finish this? I did. That evening, I drove to the Economy Inn and knocked on the door of room 237. Who is it? Jenna's voice was muffled, wary. Housekeeping. The door opened a crack, then wider when she saw it was me. She looked terrible. Hair unwashed, makeup smeared, wearing the same clothes she'd worn to our meeting at Murphy's a week earlier. What do you want? She asked. To talk. We already talked. That was before. This is after. I gestured toward the room. Mind if I come in? She stepped aside reluctantly. The room was a mirror image of the one she'd left me in 7 years ago. Same cheap furniture, same stained carpet, same smell of industrial disinfectant and despair. Nice place, I said, looking around. Brings back memories. Say what you came to say and get out. I sat down in the room's single chair. How does it feel? How does what feel? This, being alone, broke, humiliated, having everyone you trusted turn against you, having your life fall apart while strangers watch and judge. Jenna sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. It feels like hell. Good. She looked up at me. You really hate me that much? I told you before, this isn't about hate. This is about consequences. Consequences for what? A stupid prank we pulled when we were kids? Consequences for thinking you could hurt people without it ever coming back on you. Consequences for believing that some people matter and some people don't. I never thought that. Sure you did. You thought I was nobody important. Just some construction worker you could humiliate for your own amusement. Someone whose pain didn't matter because he wasn't in your social circle. Jenna was crying now. We were young. We made a mistake. You made a choice, and now you get to live with the results of that choice. For how long? I stood up, straightening my jacket. For the rest of your life. Just like I had to. Wait! She jumped up, grabbing my arm again. You said before that Emily and Lexi were getting a fresh start. What about me? What about you? Don't I get a fresh start? A chance to make things right? I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. You had 7 years to make things right. 7 years to find me, apologize, try to repair the damage you'd done. Instead, you moved to another city, married your boyfriend, and pretended none of it ever happened. I was scared. Of what? Of facing what we'd done, of admitting we were wrong. And now I'm facing it. Now I'm admitting it. She looked up at me with desperate eyes. I'm sorry, Nate. I'm truly, genuinely sorry for everything we did to you. I know you are. I gently removed her hand from my arm. But being sorry doesn't entitle you to forgiveness, and forgiveness doesn't entitle you to a fresh start. So, that's it? I just live like this forever? You live however you choose to live. That's the beautiful thing about consequences. They're yours to own. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Jenna, that video of you and your sisters tying me up, the one you live-streamed to humiliate me, what about it? I kept a copy, had it authenticated by a forensic video expert, documented the date and timestamps, traced the IP addresses of everyone who watched it live. I smiled. Funny thing about the internet. Nothing ever really disappears. Her face went white. What are you going to do with it? Nothing, probably. I don't need to destroy you anymore. You've done that yourself. I opened the door. But it's nice to know it's there. Just in case you ever decide to start telling people that this whole thing was unfair, or that I somehow wronged you. I left her standing in that cheap motel room, surrounded by the wreckage of her life, finally understanding what 7 years of consequences looked like. It was over. The next morning, Mrs. Winchell brought me the final piece of news. Jenna Peterson left town last night, she said, settling into her kitchen chair. Checked out of the Economy Inn around midnight, drove off in that BMW of hers. Where'd she go? Nobody knows. Didn't tell anyone she was leaving, didn't leave a forwarding address. Mrs. Winchell stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Of course, word is the BMW's gonna get repossessed anyway. Bank finally figured out the payments were coming from Carter's business account. What about the legal troubles? Oh, those are still waiting for her. Can't run from a federal investigation. But I suppose she figures she's got nothing left to lose by trying. And Carter? Took a plea deal yesterday. 5 years in federal prison plus restitution to all the people he defrauded. She paused. Emily and Lexi won't have to pay back those loans, though. Prosecutor agreed they were victims, not accomplices. Good. Indeed. Mrs. Winchell stood to leave. You know, Nate, I always said that woman would get what was coming to her eventually. Just took a little longer than expected. After she left, I sat in my kitchen for a while, drinking coffee and watching the sun come up over the construction sites and abandoned lots of our little corner of nowhere. 7 years, 3 months, and 24 days. That's how long it had taken for justice to catch up with Jenna Peterson. Not the quick, satisfying justice of movies and television, but the slow, patient justice of real life. The kind that builds over time, layer by layer, consequence by consequence, until the weight of it becomes unbearable. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Emily's number. How are you doing? Her reply came back quickly. Better? Got a new job interview next week. Bank in the next town over? Good. What about Lexi? She's applying to college. Wants to be a paralegal, help people who get taken advantage of by lawyers and businesses. Sounds perfect for her. What about you? What's next? I looked around my kitchen, at the coffee mug Mrs. Winchell had given me for Christmas, at the construction schedules pinned to my refrigerator, at the life I'd built from nothing after Jenna destroyed everything I thought I could count on. Same as always. Work hard, treat people right, and mind my own business. That's it? That's enough. I put the phone away and finished my coffee. Outside, I could hear the sounds of the city waking up. Truck engines starting, construction crews heading to work sites, normal people living normal lives. 7 years ago, I'd been one of those normal people. Naive, trusting, unprepared for the kind of cruelty that some people carry inside them like a disease. Now, I was something else. Harder, wiser, more careful about who I trusted and why. I'd learned that some people see kindness as weakness, that some people mistake forgiveness for permission to hurt you again. But I'd also learned that patience was indeed a virtue, that justice delayed was not necessarily justice denied, and that sometimes the best revenge was simply letting people face the natural consequences of their choices. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Red. Heard she left town. You satisfied? I thought about that question for a long moment before responding. I'm done. Same thing? No. But it's enough. I deleted Jenna's contact information from my phone, along with all the photos and documentation I'd collected over the past few weeks. I didn't need them anymore. Then I got dressed, grabbed my hard hat and work gloves, and headed out to the job site. I had a foundation to pour, deadlines to meet, and a crew that was counting on me to keep them busy. Normal work, normal life, normal problems that could be solved with hard work and honest dealing. It was enough. 3 months later, I got a postcard in the mail. No return address, postmarked from somewhere in California. On the front was a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge. On the back, in Jenna's handwriting, I understand now. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a minute, then dropped it in the trash. Some apologies come too late to matter. Some damage can't be undone with words. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. But understanding is something. Acknowledgement is something. The knowledge that justice was done, that actions had consequences, that the universe occasionally balanced its books. That was something too. I never heard from her again.